Hello, welcome to the American Constitution course. I am your course creator and host, the Grouchy Historian. Thank you for joining me. I hope you find this course both enlightening and entertaining. All right, the course overview, what we're attempting to accomplish in the next 28 weeks, 4 quarters as it were, or the academic year, however you wish to look at it, is to provide an introductory look at the Constitution, its origins, structure, test, and interpretation via selected Supreme Court cases. I also want to provide a forum for the student, you, to examine some of the major political and legal issues facing our country. And believe me, there's a bunch. So the required text, again, it's the Barnes & Noble collectible edition of the Constitution of the United States, a really wonderful book for about 25 bucks, leather bound, absolutely gorgeous book. If you're a homeschooler, you'll get your money's worth out of this book. Recommended texts. There will be a great deal of writing in this course. More about that in a minute. I recommend keeping handy your copy of a manual for writers known as the Turabian. If you really want to, excuse me, learn more about this subject, there are some really excellent books. My number one recommendation is The Words That Made Us by Professor Amar. It's just a fabulous book. His quote of pretty much the entire book is the way he wrote the book. It's both a history and a legal brief. He's a professor of constitutional law, and his quote is, "Historians don't know enough about the law, and lawyers don't know any history." This book combines both of them. It's got my copy handy right here. It's a doorstop. But I'm telling you, I turned the pages in this book like it was a Tom Clancy novel. That's how good it was. There's a couple of other guides. The Heritage Foundation Guide to the Constitution, if you can find it, it's a tad pricey, but it is absolutely invaluable. And it goes through every section, every clause, every article of the Constitution, digs into it, provides any legal cases that help define or shape it. If you're ready to go to law school or thinking about law school, hey, pick up a copy. You won't go wrong. And of course, there's also a book, Introduction to Constitutional Law. This is actually written as a sort of college level course with videos that come with the book when you buy it. Okay, let's get started. What are the course objectives here? Well, obviously, we want to introduce the students to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution through the use of primary and secondary source documents. Lots and lots of primary source documents here. You will get things unfiltered. And that is my goal, to give you the unfiltered information to the greatest extent possible and let you interpret it, decide it, and absorb it on your own. We will also introduce students to how these documents have been interpreted by the Supreme Court through a series of historic cases. The Constitution was written and almost immediately got hauled into court, right? I mean, isn't that how America is? So there are a lot of Supreme Court cases we'll go through. Why is this important? Well, because the Constitution today, 2021 America, is still being interpreted by the Supreme Court. So this is a highly relevant topic that, trust me, whether you know it or not, you are affected by it. But as a student, there are some scholastic objectives, as it were. Number one is critical thinking skills. This is probably my number one goal in this course, is not to indoctrinate you, not to teach you. I might occasionally opine, hopefully will not do it too much, and I will definitely let you know when I will, and I am. But for the most part, the goal here is to let you teach yourself. I think this is one of the most important goals of any academic experience, particularly for homeschooling, but even for private or public schooling, how to teach yourself, how to use your own critical thinking skills to ingest information, process it, assimilate it, synthesize it, analyze it, collate it, all the things, and then most importantly, to be able to communicate your findings, as it were, in both written and oral forms. You will do a lot of writing for this course. This is intentional. I will do a paper every week with some long papers and some essays, of course, for all the tests. This is intentional. I think it's important both to learn the material, but also to develop the skills to be able to communicate and write effectively. And most important, is to allow you, the student, to interpret these documents and how they affect your own life via current events. All right, so let's get started with the first quarter, okay? We begin with the pre-colonial era, or not the pre-colonial, the pre-independence era, as it were, the colonial era after the French and Indian War, but really even before then. If you actually read this excellent book, you'll see that the very first case that arose that started to, let's just say, offer a divergence in legal opinions between the colonies and England actually occurred in 1760. But certainly, the French and Indian War and the end of the French and Indian War was as kind of a watershed moment in American history. Up until this point, the colonists had pretty much been left on their own to their own devices, right? The English government kept a pretty light hand. They appointed royal governors. They might have, some influence in the courts, but for the most part, the colonists all governed themselves through colonial legislatures, town councils. They practiced what I like to call politics and government at the retail level, down low, where as a citizen, you could directly see the effects of the government that you voted into office. So the colonists were certainly the let's just call it the landed gentry upper class were very well educated at the time. They all knew Greek, they all knew Latin, they all studied the Roman and the Greek philosophers. You'll see this in their writings. You'll particularly see this when you start getting into reading the Federalist Papers. They were exceptionally well versed on Greek and Roman history and philosophy, but they also were starting to be influenced by the writings of the great Enlightenment thinkers, right? This is the era of the Protestant Reformation, and when people started to, certainly the well-connected and elite and wealthy, started to kind of question exactly what the role of government was or should be in their life, right? They asked questions like these: what is the purpose of government? What kind of government works best for the most people, right? So this week we've chosen some readings from John Locke, and each week in the readings, I'm going to make a short video like this, and it's not intended to be a 45-minute lecture, okay? First of all, that would wear me out and bore you to tears. So we're going to hit the high points, hit some things that I think you need to watch for as you go through the readings. So hopefully about a 10 to 12-minute video, and then you're just going to dive right into the readings. So this week for Rousseau and Locke, what I want you to keep in mind is and look at is what were their particular philosophies about what is the power and authority of the government, right? What is the role of the government? And what are sort of the limits, or are there limits, of what government should do and be, right? We understand, of course, Locke, of course, went all the way to the end, as my wife would say, and said that political power is basically the power to make laws with penalties of death. That's pretty serious stuff, right? But that is sort of the definition of government, right? The very first definition of government, if you want to break it all down, is that the government is the only people that have the legal right to inflict violence upon people, right? I don't mean violence like running around shooting people, but law enforcement, the military, they have the right to do violence on behalf of the body politic. That's the right reserved to government, right? That's why we don't have vigilante justice. That's why we don't have, to excess, private military companies or private armies, right? The government has the role and the exclusive right to use violence on behalf of the body politic. But again, our founders debated these and debated what kind of government they should have, right? This is the first time in the colonial experience that they started to question the needs and the rights of a monarchy, right? You'll see in your book, and I think it's really the notebook you got with the course, the syllabus, I think it's really important to keep in mind the different types of governments there are, right? There are democracies, monarchies, totalitarian, oligarchies, and it's important to kind of know the differences between each of these, right? And to really think about it on a practical level, what kind of government do we really have in America today, right? Now, the fundamental thing that most people get wrong is they're like, we're a democracy. No, we are a constitutional republic. Now, they may say, well, what's the difference? Why is that important? Oh, it's very important. It's very important, right? A democracy is a simple, majority vote wins, right? I guess like if you're with your family and you're deciding to vote on pizza toppings, the majority vote wins, except in my house when my wife wants to put anchovies on my pizza. And then I exercise my role as a benevolent dictator and say, no, you're not putting anchovies on my pizza. You can get your own pizza with anchovies. Anyway. But a constitutional republic is very specific. It has a constitution or a charter of rights to protect the minority against the tyranny of majority. Think of it another way. A pure democracy is kind of like Twitter, right? You get a Twitter mob going that goes after somebody because they don't like what they say. It's bad because nobody's controlling the mob. They might say they do, but anyway. So we don't want rule by Twitter mob. And that's an important distinction to keep in mind as our founders started to form the government and started to write a constitution. They didn't want a democracy, a pure democracy, because they knew a democracy tended to rule by emotion, tended to be ruled by demagogues, and they could make very hasty and ill-informed decisions that would ultimately be bad for the body politic, okay? So keep in mind that we are not a democracy. A democracy may work at a town level where everybody can come in and pitch in and vote. But for most of us, we don't even have a pure democracy at our local level, right? We have a mayor, we might have a town council, okay? Because the point is that is intended to slow down and prevent the tyranny of the majority over the minority. Now, I know some of you will say, well, there are exceptions. Well, there's always exceptions to a rule, right? There are such things as questions that get put on the ballot, right? There are things that go directly to the people to vote on. We do this, almost every year in our county where I live. They almost always have a bond issue that is up for the vote by the people every year, and it's put directly on the ballot, and it's a ballot question. Okay, that is a form of pure democracy. You're going to vote whether you want your property taxes to go up because your county is selling and financing more bonds. But for the most part, every level of government in America today is effectively a constitutional republic, representative type of government, okay? So that's important to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the course. Now, each week, of course, there's going to be some questions. These can be something that you can kind of discuss with your instructor, or you can just kind of think about as you go through the readings. And then there is a paper topic. Now, keep in mind that I made, again, this is up to your instructor, but I find that maybe a 4 to 6 page paper is usually enough to cover the topics of the week. And also, most importantly, I think forcing a student, you, to write a short, concise, to the point paper is more challenging than just bleh, a bunch of stuff on a paper to fill it up, right? So the challenge each week is to be brief, to have your facts ordered, and to be able to make your point and draw your conclusions and back up your conclusions in about, 4 to 6 pages. All right, so that's the first week. Again, I want you to, as you go through these documents, remember, these are the very same documents that our founders read. And it heavily influenced their thinking as they went through the crisis of between 1763 and about 1775. More on that next.